Here's the thing that nobody talks about. Australians in the 50s, 60s and 70s were healthier than we are now, and it had nothing to do with gyms or supplements or counting calories. They smoked like chimneys, drank like fish, and thought sunscreen was for sooks, yet somehow they were fitter, leaner and stronger than most people you see today. It doesn't make sense until you start looking at what they actually did every single day. The habits so ordinary they didn't even register as healthy. And then you realize something uncomfortable. We've been doing it wrong. Not entirely, but enough that it's worth asking why a generation that never set foot in a Pilates class or ate a superfood bowl could run circles around us. The answer isn't in what they knew about health, it's in what they didn't have to think about. Their lives just forced them to move, to eat real food, to sleep properly, and to exist in ways that kept their bodies working the way bodies are supposed to work. And then everything changed, and we got sicker trying to get healthier. So let's walk through it, piece by piece, and see what they were doing that we've completely forgotten how to do. The first thing you notice when you look back is how much they walked, not for exercise, just to get places. If you needed bread, you walked to the shops. If you were meeting a mate, you walked to the pub. If you had to get to work and the bus stop was a mile away, you walked. Nobody called it fitness, it was just how you moved through the world. The car was for longer trips or hauling things, but for everything else, you used your legs. And here's the part that made it count. You weren't just strolling, you were walking with purpose. Carrying shopping bags, pushing a pram, hauling tools, moving at a pace because you had somewhere to be. That constant low-level movement, day after day, kept everyone's baseline fitness higher than most people manage. Now even with a gym membership. Your body stayed strong because it had to be. There was no choice. Kids walked to school every day, rain or shine, sometimes miles each way, and nobody drove them unless they lived out in the sticks. And when they got home, they didn't sit inside playing video games, they went straight back outside, rode bikes, climbed trees, kicked a footy around, built cubbies, explored the bush. They were moving from the moment school finished until the streetlights came on, and that movement wasn't structured or supervised, it was just what kids did. And the shocking part is, nobody thought twice about it. There were no playdates, no organised sports every night of the week, no parents hovering to make sure they didn't hurt themselves. Kids just went outside and figured it out, and in doing so, they built strength, coordination, and resilience without anyone calling it exercise. If this sounds familiar, mate, just wait till you hear what they were eating. Because the food was simple, brutally simple. Meat and 3-veg for dinner every single night. Chops, sausages, a roast on Sunday, potatoes, carrots, peas, beans. No sauces, no fancy seasonings, just plain food cooked in a pan or baked in the oven. Breakfast was toast with butter or porridge. Lunch was a sandwich, maybe some fruit. And that was it. No snacking between meals, no processed junk lining the pantry, no soft drink unless it was a special occasion. The reason it worked wasn't because they were being virtuous, it was because that's all there was. The supermarket had about 10% of what it stocks now, and most of it was actual food, not food-like products engineered in a lab. You couldn't buy a packet of chips in 47 different flavours or a freezer full of ready meals. If you wanted dinner, someone had to cook it from scratch, and that meant real ingredients. And portion sizes were smaller, not because people were dieting, but because food cost money, and you didn't waste it. You ate what was on your plate, you didn't go back for seconds unless you were genuinely still hungry, and you waited till the next meal if you wanted more. The idea of eating whenever you felt like it, grazing all day long, that wasn't a thing. You ate at mealtimes, and in between, you just got on with life. But here's where it gets interesting. They weren't afraid of fat, butter, cream, dripping, lard, full cream milk. It was all normal. Nobody was counting calories or cutting carbs or worrying about cholesterol. They just ate what their parents and grandparents had eaten, and somehow heart disease was lower, obesity was rare, and people lived longer without all the anxiety around food that we've got now. The movement didn't stop at walking. Everything required physical effort. If you wanted to change the channel on the telly, you had to get up and turn the dial. If you wanted to talk to someone, you walked to their house or rang them on a phone attached to the wall. If you needed to do the washing, you filled the copper, scrubbed the clothes by hand, wrung them out, and hung them on the line. There were no shortcuts, no devices doing the work for you, just your body doing what bodies are designed to do. And the housework kept people moving all day. Sweeping, mopping, dusting, beating the rugs, kneading dough, pegging out washing, mowing the lawn with a push mower that had no motor. It was constant, repetitive, physical work that kept muscles engaged and burned energy without anyone thinking about it as exercise. The women who ran the household were often fitter than their husbands because they never stopped moving. The men weren't off the hook either. Most jobs involved manual labour. If you worked on a building site, in a factory, on a farm, down the wharves, you were lifting, carrying, bending, hauling all day long. Even office jobs required more movement because there were no emails or computers. You walked documents to other desks, you filed things by hand, you stood at the photocopier or the typewriter. Nobody sat still for 8 hours straight staring at a screen. If you lived it, you already know where this is going. Because the other thing that kept people healthier was sleep, proper sleep. The kind you get when your body is exhausted from a full day of moving and you don't have screens keeping you awake till midnight. Most people were in bed by 9 or 10, up at sunrise, and getting 7 or 8 hours without thinking about it. No scrolling, no binge watching, no lying there worrying about things you can't control, just sleep, deep and restorative, because your body had earned it. And the social connection mattered too. People talked to each other, face to face, not through a phone. You'd chat to your neighbours over the fence, have a cuppa with a mate who dropped by, sit on the veranda in the evening and talk about nothing in particular. That regular human connection, that feeling of being part of a community, it kept people grounded in ways that we've lost. Loneliness wasn't the epidemic it is now because you were never really alone. But here's the uncomfortable bit. They weren't doing any of this on purpose. They weren't trying to be healthy. They were just living the only way they knew how. The walking, the real food, the physical work, the sleep, the social connection, it was all just normal life. And because it was normal, they didn't have to think about it or force themselves to do it. It just happened. And then the world changed. Cars became more affordable, so walking stopped. Processed food flooded the supermarkets, so cooking from scratch felt like too much effort. Labour-saving devices took over the housework, so the constant movement disappeared. Screens took over the evenings, so sleep got shorter and worse. And we convinced ourselves that we could make up for all of it by going to the gym 3 times a week or eating a salad for lunch. But it doesn't work like that. You can't replace an entire lifestyle of incidental movement and real food with an hour at the gym and a protein shake. The body doesn't respond to intensity the same way it responds to consistency. And the mental health benefits of walking to the shops, chatting to your neighbour, sleeping properly, eating meals with your family, those things can't be replicated by a fitness app or a wellness program. The shocking part isn't that they were healthier, it's that they were healthier by accident and were sicker on purpose. We've engineered convenience into every corner of life, and in doing so, we've removed the very things that kept people strong. And now, we're paying for it with obesity, diabetes, heart disease, anxiety, depression, and a dozen other conditions that were rare back then. And here's where it all started to fall apart. The shift happened slowly, so slowly that nobody noticed until it was too late. The first labour-saving devices seemed brilliant. Who wouldn't want a washing machine or a car or a remote control? But each one removed a little bit of movement, a little bit of effort, and over time, those little bits added up. And the food industry saw an opportunity. They could make cheap, convenient, shelf-stable products that tasted good and required no effort. And people bought them because life was getting busier and cooking from scratch felt like a luxury nobody had time for anymore. The gyms appeared because people realized they weren't moving enough, but instead of changing their lives to include more natural movement, they tried to cram it all into an hour a few times a week, and it didn't work. Because the body doesn't want an hour of intense exercise after sitting still all day. It wants consistent, varied, functional movement spread across the entire day. The kind of movement that comes from living a life that requires you to use your body. And the diet industry exploded because people were getting heavier and sicker, and instead of looking at what had changed, they blamed themselves. They thought they were lazy, undisciplined, lacking willpower. So they tried every fad diet, every supplement, every trick, and most of it failed because the problem wasn't willpower, it was the environment. We'd built a world that made it almost impossible to stay healthy without a massive, constant effort. The people who lived through the 50s, 60s, and 70s didn't have to work at being healthy. It was just a side effect of the life they lived. And now, when you see an older bloke or woman from that era still walking everywhere, still eating simple meals, still going to bed early and waking with the sun, you realize they never stopped. They kept the habits because the habits worked. And they're still healthier than people half their age who are trying 10 times harder. The irony is painful. We know more about health than any generation in history, and we're the sickest. We've got apps and trackers and experts and programs, and none of it has made us healthier because we're trying to fix the symptoms without addressing the cause. The cause is simple. We stopped moving, we stopped eating real food, we stopped sleeping properly, and we stopped connecting with each other. And no amount of biohacking or supplements or fitness trends is going to fix that. The old habits are still there, waiting, walking instead of driving, cooking instead of ordering, sleeping instead of scrolling, talking instead of texting. They're not complicated, they're not expensive, they're just hard to do in a world that's designed to make them unnecessary. And maybe that's the real shock. The healthiest thing you could do is live more like they did. Not in every way, but in the ways that mattered. Move your body because you have to, not because you're trying to burn calories. Eat food that looks like food. Sleep when you're tired. Talk to the people around you. The house is quieter now, the streets are emptier, but the habits that kept people strong, they're still there if you want them.